Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Jati. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Jati. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Jati. Gopi Jana Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtottara Tata Shri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtottara Tata Shri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Srila Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Srila Satyananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Vaishnava Sarvabhuma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Jaya Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhattan Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Das Raghunath Asad Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityanand Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakund Radhakund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Yamuna Mai Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Pranath Raj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Ishkan Varma Guru Vrinda Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Gora Pramanende. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru Sri Guranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Naram Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devam Saraswatam Vyasam Tito Jayam Yuridayat Nasta Preshu Abrat Preshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed. And loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. All right. So today is Sunday, January 14th, 2024. And we're reading Canto 4, Creation of the Fourth Order, Chapter 20, Lord Vishnu's appearance in the sacrificial arena of Maharaj Prithu, and we'll be reading verses 35 and 36. Okay. Devarshi Pitir Gandharva Siracharana Panaga Kinarapsara Somartya Kagabhutana Nekasha Yagneshvara Diyaragna Bhagavatanjali Bhaktita Sabhajitaya Yusarve Vaikuntanu Katastata Devashi Pitir Gandharva Siracharana Panaga Kinarapsara Somartya Kagabhutana Nekasha Yagneshvara Diyaragna Bhagavatanjali Bhaktita Sabhajitaya Yusarve Vaikuntana Katastata Devashi Pitir Gandharva Siracharana Panaga Kinarapsara Somartya Kagabhutana Nekasha Yagneshvara Diyaragna Bhagavatanjali Bhaktita Sabhajitaya Yusarve Vaikuntanu Katastata. Okay, please chant.
Devarshi Pitri Gandharva
Devarshi Pitir Gandharva
Siddhacharana Panaga
Siracharana Panaga
Kinarapsara Somartya
Kinarapsara Somartya
Bhagavutanya Nekasa
Kagabhutana Nekasha
Vidyaswara Dhyaragya
Yagneshvara Diyaragna
Vagvitanjali Bhaktita
Bhagavatanjali Bhaktita
Savajita Yeyu Sarve
Sabhajitaya Yusarve
Vaikuntanu Katastata
Vaikuntanu Katastata. Anyone else?
Devarshi Pitri Gandharva
Devarshi Pitir Gandharva
Siracharana Panaga
Siracharana Panaga
Kinarapsara Somartya
Kinarapsara Somartya
Kagabhutanya Nekasha
Kagabhutana Nekasha
Yageshvara Diyaragya
Yagneshvara Diyaragya
Bhagavatanjali Bhaktita
Bhagavatanjali Bhaktita
Sabhajitaya Yusarve
Savajitaya Yusarve
Vaikuntanu Gatastata
Vaikuntana Gatastata. Anyone else want to try? All right, we'll go to word for word. All right, Deva, the demigods, Rishis, the great sages, Pitir, inhabitants of Pitirloka, Gandharva, inhabitants of Gandharvaloka, Siddha, inhabitants of Siddhaloka, Charana, inhabitants of Charanaloka, Panaga, inhabitants of planets where serpents live, Kinara, inhabitants of the Kinara planets, Apsarasa, inhabitants of Apsaraloka, Martyaha, inhabitants of the earthly planets, Kaga, birds, Utani, other living entities. Anekasha,
Ekasha,
many. Yagya Ishvara Diya, with the perfect intelligence of thinking as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord.
with the perfect intelligence of thinking as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord.
Ragna,
Ragya,
by the king. Vak, with sweet words. Vita,
Vita,
wealth. Anjali, with folded hands. Bhaktita, in a spirit of devotional service. Sabhajita, being properly worshipped. Yayahu, went. Sarve, all. Vaikuntha, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vishnu. Anugataha, followers. Tata, from that place. Translation by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. King Prithu worshipped the demigods, the great sages, the inhabitants of Pitarloka, the inhabitants of Gandharvaloka, and those of Siddhaloka, Charanaloka, Panagaloka, Kinaraloka, Apsaraloka, the earthly planets and the planets of the birds. He also worshipped many other living entities who presented themselves in the sacrificial arena. With folded hands, he worshipped all these, as well as the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the personal associates of the Lord, by offering sweet words and as much wealth as possible. After this function, they all went back to their respective abodes, following in the footsteps of Lord Vishnu. Okay, please repeat. King Prithu worshipped the demigods, the great sages, the inhabitants of Pitarloka, the inhabitants of Gandharvaloka, and those of Siddharloka, Charanaloka, Panagoloka, Kinaraloka, Apsaraloka, the earthly planets and the planets of the birds. He also worshipped many other living entities who presented themselves in the sacrificial arena. With folded hands, he worshipped all these, as well as the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the personal associates of the Lord, by offering sweet words and as much wealth as possible. After this function, they all went back to their respective abodes, following in the footsteps of Lord Vishnu. A purport. In the modern so-called scientific society, the idea is very prevalent that there is no life on other planets, but that only on this earth do living entities with intelligence and scientific knowledge exist. The Vedic literatures, however, do not accept this foolish theory. The followers of Vedic wisdom are fully aware of various planets inhabited by varieties of living entities, such as the demigods, the sages, the Pitas, the Gandharvas, the Panagas, the Kinaras, the Charanas, the Siddhas, and the Apsaras. The Vedas give information that in all planets, not only within this material sky, but also in the spiritual sky, there are varieties of living entities. Although all these living entities are of one spiritual nature, in quality the same as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they have varieties of bodies due to the embodiment of the spirit soul by the 8 material elements, namely earth, water, fire, air, sky, mind, intelligence, and false ego. In the spiritual world, however, there is no such distinction between the body and the embodied. In the material world, distinctive features are manifested in different types of bodies in the various planets. We have full information from the Vedic literature that in each and every planet, both material and spiritual, there are living entities of varied intelligence. The Earth is one of the planets of the Burloka planetary system. There are 6 planetary systems above Burloka and 7 planetary systems below it. Therefore, the entire universe is known as Chatturdasa Bhuvana, indicating that it has 14 different planetary systems. Beyond the planetary systems in the material sky, there is another sky, which is known as Paravyoma, or the spiritual sky, where there are spiritual planets. The inhabitants of those planets engage in varieties of loving service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which include different rasas, or relationships, known as Dasya Ras, Sakya Ras, Vatsalya Ras, Madhurya Ras, and above all, Parakya Ras. This Parakya Ras, or paramour love, is prevalent in Krishna Loka, where Lord Krishna lives. This planet is also called Goloka Vrindavan, and although Lord Krishna lives there perpetually, he also expands himself in millions and trillions of forms. In one of such forms, he appears on this material planet in a particular place known as Vrindavan Dham, where he displays his original pastimes of Goloka Vrindavan Dham in the spiritual sky in order to attract the conditioned souls back home, back to Godhead. Om Gyana Timarandasya Gyana Jana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadam Ayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatan Sahagana Rakamatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Savadekam Savajutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bando Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostute Dapta Kanchana Rangi Radhe Vrindavan Ishwari Vrishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Pre Panchakopa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so we know what's been going on here is King Prithu has been trying to make a sacrifice of 100 horse sacrifice, and Indra became kind of a little bit jealous of this and stole his 100th horse, and so he wasn't able to complete the 100 horse sacrifices. But it is no matter. Lord Vishnu was pleased, and he appeared in his arena anyway. And he had just offered so many wonderful prayers to Lord Vishnu, and now Lord Vishnu has left the arena. And so we hear in this verse that King Prithu is then worshiping the demigods, the great sages, all those different entities that was named in the verse. So Maharaj Prithu, he's the ideal Vaishnava king. And the duty of the king is to serve and take care of their subjects. And so let's see what the Bhagavatam says in the first canto. The supreme duty of the ruling king is to give all protection to law-abiding persons and to chastise those who stray from the ordinances of scripture in ordinary times when there is no emergency. And so that's the duty of a king, is to take care of its subjects. And so the duty of a Vaishnava is to love and serve the Lord. And Prithu is worshiping and serving all the different living entities. And all those different living entities are part and parcel of the Lord. So let's hear what the Bhagavad Gita has to say about this. So Bhagavad Gita 4:35 says, "And when you have thus learned the truth, you will know," and this is Krishna speaking, "when you have thus learned the truth, you will know that all living beings are but a part of me, and that they are in me and are mine." Bhagavad Gita 10:20 says, "I am the super soul, O Arjuna, seated in the hearts of all living entities. I am the beginning, the middle, and the end of all beings." 10:41 says, "Know that all beautiful, glorious, and mighty creations spring from but a spark of my splendor." And 15:7 says, "The The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. So that pretty definitively says that all the living entities are part of Krishna. And so we can see that Maharaj Prithu, after he was worshiping the Lord, he then was worshiping all the great sages and demigods who are also part of the Lord. And so a Vaishnava, a learned, truly learned person, should see all these different kinds of entities and people as the same. Bhagavad Gita 5:18 says, the humble sages, by virtue of true knowledge, see with equal vision a learned and gentle brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater. So we should see all of these people and entities with equal vision. Now, that doesn't mean we necessarily treat everybody the same, but we still have that care and respect for them within our hearts. You know, if I see, I see a tiger is part and parcel of the Lord, but I'm not going to run over and give him a high five like I would to one of my best friends. And that's because the tiger would probably try to bite me or harm me. But that doesn't mean that I wouldn't still recognize him as part and parcel of the Lord. So we want to use a little bit of common sense there. So I want you to think about our politicians today, our leaders and our kings, our presidents today. They don't really act like this. The part that I really liked here is in the verse. It says, offering sweet words and as much wealth as possible. Do our politicians do that to us? I don't think so. I mean, if we're lucky, we might get some very false platitudes, right? Not really sweet words. And certainly they are not trying to give as much wealth as possible. Like they're often trying to take as much wealth as possible. So this is not what is going on today in our world with our leaders at all. So Krishna is pleased, not so much when his devotees are serving him, but when his devotees are serving his devotees. Srila Prabhupada says in the Nectar of Devotion, in the Adi Purana, there is a following statement by Lord Krishna himself addressed to Arjuna. My dear Partha, one who claims to be my devotee is not so. Only a person who claims to be the devotee of my devotee is actually my devotee. No one can approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead directly. One must approach him through his pure devotees. So that's what pleases Krishna the most, is serving his devotees. Because sometimes I like to think about what, if I were God, it would get pretty tiresome, if somebody's always, people are always just like falling at my feet and trying to serve me, and that would get pretty tiresome. I mean, it might be nice I'd probably dig it for about a day, maybe. I'd be like, yeah, this is pretty cool. But after a while, that would get a little tiresome. So let's move on to what the purport says here. So a common misconception that is had by so many people all over the world is that we're the most advanced we've ever been, right? I mean, a lot of people think that. It's, we have so much wonderful science. We have airplanes. We can fly across the world. And I mean, you can take, I think they decommissioned the Concorde, but it used to be a few hours you could get from New York to London, or Paris, I don't remember. So we like to think that we're the most advanced we've ever been, and also that we're alone. We're alone in the universe. We're the only ones. We're the only ones, and we're the most advanced. We're the best. But the Shastras don't agree with that. And in anthropology, there's a term called ethnocentrism. Has anybody heard that term before? Yeah, so ethnocentrism means that you're kind of viewing other cultures in relation to your own and thinking your own is the best, and that yours is the best. And so you're sort of like viewing every thing that's different, every different culture through that lens. And that's kind of what all of humanity is doing. So we're just, oh, we're the best. This culture that's here right now, we're the most advanced. But really, if you objectively just look at, well, so the sastras actually say that there are 400,000 species of human, and some have higher consciousness than we have, some have lower consciousness than we have. If you still are thinking like, okay, this is the best the culture has ever been, just look at even our recent past, like we call it the ancient days, but really it's not that long ago. Just look at the architecture. I mean, the buildings that we're building now, I mean, probably within a few hundred years, you're going to be in great disrepair. But yet there's still these amazing stone structures that sometimes we don't have any idea how the previous humans built them. And that goes to show that they have some knowledge that we don't have. We don't have anymore. Some talent that we don't have anymore. And so that's just looking at things materially. We don't have, if you look at the architecture, if you look at the culture, our culture right now is pretty degraded. You know, we're, at least in the United States, our culture pretty much revolves around making money and what kinds of things can I buy in order to impress my neighbors and make myself feel good about the fact that pretty much my life is relatively empty. That's really what our main focus of our culture is we want to make sure the kids get a good education so that they can get a good job, so they can get a nice house, so they can have a nice car and a nice family. And, you know, that's not a very fulfilling culture. And we can see this by all the problems that we're having in our culture. We have so much drug addiction, so much crime, and you know, just really horrible things that are going on right now. You know, we have like school shootings going on, and things are getting measurably worse. Just in my lifetime, I've seen things get progressively worse and more at a more rapid pace as well. So I don't think I'm sold that our culture is the best it's ever been. So the previous purport from yesterday says the purpose of Krishna taking birth was to establish devotional service. And this purport talks about the different ways that you can serve the Lord. And this is what is so interesting. In other traditions, like I'm most familiar with Christian traditions, really there's only one kind of relationship you have with the Lord, and that's one of like awe and reverence. You know, and you don't have the Lord over for a cup of tea. You don't you know, sit and make jokes with him. You know, you just on reverence, you listen to the thou shalt not, thou shalt do this, thou shalt not do this. But in the Vedas, it tells us that there is different ways we can serve the Lord. So there's dasi ras, and so that is in a relationship of servitude. So then there's sakya ras, that's a relationship of friendship. There's vatsalya ras, which is a parental type of relationship. Imagine that. You can be the parent of God. How far out is that? Then there's Shantaras, which is a neutral, kind of a neutral relationship. Then there's Madhurya Ras, which is a conjugal relationship, like a romantic type relationship. And then there's Parikya Ras, which is paramour love, which is kind of like a subcategory of Madhurya Ras. Let's see, I have this little quote from, this is from the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, chapter 1, and it kind of explains the rasas a little better than I can. The transcendental rasas, or relationships, can be divided into 5. The initial stage is called Shantaras, or Shantarati, wherein one who is liberated from material contamination appreciates the greatness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who attains this stage does not exactly engage in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. This is a neutral stage. In the second stage, which is called dasi, a person appreciates his position as being everlastingly subordinate to the Supreme Lord, and he understands that he is eternally dependent on the causeless mercy of the Supreme Person. At that same time, there is an awakening of natural affection, such as is felt by a son who grows up and begins to appreciate his father's benedictions. At this stage, the living entity wants to serve the Supreme Lord instead of serving Maya, illusion. In the third stage, called Sakyarati, transcendental love is developed, and one associates with the Supreme Lord on an equal level of love and respect. As this stage is further developed, there is joking and such relaxed exchanges as laughing and so on. On this level, there are fraternal exchanges with the Supreme Person, and one is freed from all bondage. At this stage, one practically forgets his inferior position as a living entity, but at the same time, he has the greatest respect for the Supreme Person. In the fourth stage, called Vatsalyarati, the fraternal affection evinced in the preceding stage develops into parental affection. At this time, the living entity tries to be the parent of God. Instead of worshiping the Lord, the living entity, as a parent of the Supreme, becomes an object of worship for the Supreme Person. At this stage, the Lord depends on the mercy of his pure devotee and puts himself under the control of the devotee to be raised. The devotee in this stage attains a position where he can embrace the Supreme Lord and even kiss his head. In the fifth stage, called Madhuryarati, there is an actual transcendental exchange of conjugal love between the lover and the beloved. It is at this stage that Krishna and the damsels of Braj glanced at one another for on this platform there is an exchange of loving glances, motions of the eyes, pleasant words, and attractive smiles, etc. So that's pretty amazing, right? It's a far cry from what you learn, in Christianity. You don't really learn that much about God, other than, you should fear him. And then it says in the Bible that God is a loving God, but you don't really hear much about in what ways. And so when I first heard about these different relationships you could have with God, it totally blew my mind. I was like, wait a minute, you mean like I can have a friend relationship with Krishna? I can, sit around and joke with him, or I could have a romantic relationship with him, or he could be my child. I mean, that's just really boggled my mind. But it's true, these are different ways that you can serve God and have this relationship with Krishna. And again, like I said earlier, I mean, think about how boring it would be if everybody was just awe and reverence all the time. I mean, there would be no flavor there, right? I mean, some of the best things in life is the relationships you have with others. And if everyone's just doing awe and reverence, it's just very tiresome. So yeah, I have a few examples of these different rasas. And so while I'm giving some of these examples, maybe if some of you that know some of the stories, you can think about an example of one of these rasas that you can give. But the first one I wanted to start with was Sakyaras, which is friendship. And in the Krishna book, at the beginning of the story of the killing of the Agashura demon, which is one of my favorite stories, I just find it really hilarious, which I'll give I don't know if I have time to tell the whole thing the way I wanted to, but I can give a short synopsis. But right before that story starts, there's this great little part where they're talking about Krishna and his friends having lunch in the forest. And I just always loved this description, so I'm going to read that. So once the Lord desired to go early in the morning with all his cowherd boyfriends to the forest, where they were to assemble together and take lunch. As soon as he got up from bed, he blew his buffalo horn bugle and called all his friends together. Keeping the calves before them, they started for the forest in a great procession. In this way, Lord Krishna assembled thousands of his boyfriends. They were each equipped with a stick, a flute, a horn, as well as a lunch bag, and each of them were taking care of thousands of calves. All the boys appeared very jolly and happy in that excursion. Each and every one of them, including Krishna, was attentive to his personal calves as he herded them in the different places in the forest. The boys were fully decorated with various kinds of golden ornaments, yet out of sporting propensities they began to pick up flowers, leaves, twigs, peacock feathers, and red clay from different places in the forest, and further decorate themselves in different ways. While passing through the forest, one boy stole another boy's lunch package and passed it to a third. When the boy whose lunch package was stolen came to know of it, he tried to take it back, but the boy who had it threw it to another boy. This sporting playing went on amongst the boys of childhood pastimes. Right? We see kids still do this, right? Playing keep away with their friends. They take something from their friend and they throw it and they keep throwing it back and forth to keep it away from their friend. When Lord Krishna went ahead to a distant place in order to see some specific scenery, the boys behind him ran to try to catch up and be the first to touch him. So there was a great competition. One would say, I will go there and touch Krishna. And another would say, oh, you cannot go, I'll touch Krishna first. Some of them played on their flutes or vibrated bugles made of buffalo horn. Some of them gladly followed the peacocks and imitated the sounds of the cuckoo. While the birds were flying in the sky, the boys ran after the birds' shadows along the ground and tried to follow their exact courses. Some of them went to the monkeys and silently sat down by them, and some of them imitated the dancing of the peacocks. Some of them caught monkeys by the tail and played with them. And when the monkeys jumped up into a tree, the boys followed. When a monkey showed its face and teeth, a boy imitated and showed his teeth to the monkey. Some of the boys played with the frogs on the bank of the Yamuna, and when out of fear the frogs jumped into the water, the boys immediately dove in after them. And when the boys came out of the water and saw their own shadows, they would stand imitating, making caricatures and laughing. They would also go to an empty well and make loud sounds, and when the echo came back, they would call it ill names and laugh. So, I mean, it just sounds like something like any group of young boys would do, you know, if they were in the forest. They're just running around, playing with the animals, playing with each other, yelling ill things down the well. I mean, just very sweet. And so that's Sakya Ras. That is a relationship in friendship that you can have with Krishna, with God. So later on, the boys ended up, there was this great demon that took the body of a giant serpent. And it says like it laid there, it wanted to take revenge on Krishna because Krishna had killed two other demons that were its siblings. And so this demon wanted to kill Krishna and all the boys and all the calves. He just wanted revenge. So he took on the body of this giant serpent and laid there with his mouth open, and the boys were like, wow, you know, look at that. That looks like a big cave over there. And they're like, but, I think some of them were like, no, I think that's a big giant serpent. And they said, well, we should go in there. Let's go in his mouth. And some of the boys were like, well, wait, will you get hurt? And they said, well, it doesn't matter. Krishna will save us. And so they all just like walked into the mouth of this big giant serpent, which I find so funny because they know it's a big giant serpent. And they go in there anyway because they know Krishna will save them. And so they take all the calves in there too. And they're all in this big giant serpent. And Krishna sees this and he's kind of just amazed at the power of Maya, the power of illusion. And he goes in after the boys to save them. And the boys are all unconscious. It's not clear if they're unconscious or if they're dead. But he goes in there and then he starts expanding himself in the throat of the big serpent and ends up choking the serpent, and the serpent dies. And then he brings all the boys and calves back to consciousness, and everybody comes out and they live. And I just think that story just cracks me up because the boys knew it was a big giant serpent and they went in anyway. So that's an example of Sakya Ras. So kind of running out of time here. Oh, let's see. So I'll skip to the end, so I wanted to give an example of Madhurya Ras. This is one of my favorite stories, where Krishna steals the clothes of the unmarried gopis. And so the gopis one day, they were worshiping goddess Durga, and generally devotees of Krishna, they do not worship the demigods. But in this way, the gopis were worshiping Durga in order to get Krishna as their husband. And so it was to further their relationship with Krishna that they were doing that. And so they all wanted, and gopis are the female cowherd, like the milkmaids, the female cowherd girls. And so they wanted to become the wife of Krishna. And so that's what they were doing. And one day they were out bathing in the river, and they had, taken their clothes off. So they're taking a bath in the river, and Krishna decides he's going to steal their clothes. And so he steals all their clothes, and the girls notice, and Krishna's sitting in the tree, kind of laughing a little bit, and tells them to come to him to get their clothes back. They're like, please give our clothes back. And he was just like, no, you have to go one by one, come to me, and then I'll give you your clothes back. And the girls at first were like, look, we're going to tell your dad. We're going to tell your dad what you're doing. And he said, well, go ahead and tell him. He's too old. He can't do anything about it. And that part always made me laugh too, because I could see a little boy saying that. And so ultimately, the girls do end up coming one by one and asking Krishna for their clothes back. And so he gives them back. And in this way, because in Vedic culture, only a husband was allowed to see the nakedness of his wife. And in this way, all the girls were able to fulfill their desire of being Krishna's wife. So lastly, I wanted to talk a little bit about Parkiya Ras, the paramour love. And so this is a story that I got from Indra Swami Prabhu, his great series on Vrindavanam. And this is the story of the stolen ring. How many of you have heard this story? The stolen ring? The story of the stolen ring. Yeah. So I encourage you to watch it, because Indra Swami tells it much better than I do. It's available on YouTube. So the story of the stolen ring. So there's a festival coming up, and Radha wants to perfect her dancing. Radharani wants to perfect her dancing. So she decides, of course, that she would like Krishna. He would be the best person to teach her how to perfect her dancing. So her friends, the other gopis, are trying to talk her out of this. They're saying, look, Krishna is not such a good dancer. We ourselves had to teach him some dance steps. So why don't we just get some professional dancers to help you, and that'll be much better. And of course, Radha, she's not keen on that. She doesn't want to do that. So then she said, no, I want to go to Krishna. She wanted to go alone. And so the gopis, they didn't trust Krishna very much, and so they were trying to convince her, well, at least have him come here. He can come to you. And of course, Radha she didn't like that idea either. She was just not going for any of these ideas. And she said very sweetly, she said, when have you seen the well? Go to a person who is thirsty. No, the thirsty person must go to the well. So Radha does go to see Krishna so he can improve her dancing. And so they're, dancing, he's giving her a lesson. And eventually Radha goes home, and her gopis are undressing her. They're changing her outfit for the day. And she wears, so they have her wears 64 different kinds of ornaments every day. And it's one of the gopis' jobs to like keep track of all these different ornaments. And so they're undressing her and they're taking all the ornaments off and putting them back in their boxes where they go. And they notice something's missing. It's one of her rings. And it's a mirror ring. And in one of Anjali Swami's other lectures, I remember him talking about another kind of mirror jewelry was kind of, Radha liked to wear it because then she could slyly look at Krishna with it by looking at his reflection, because it wasn't proper for her to look directly at him because they're not married, they're not supposed to be talking or hanging out. And so when she had the mirrored jewelry, she could very slyly look at Krishna's reflection in it. Anyway, so her mirror ring is missing. And Vishaka, one of the head gopis, tells Radha, you know what, I think Krishna stole your ring. And Radha said, no way, Krishna would never steal any of my jewelry. And Vishaka just laughed and said, dearest Radha, you do not know him. We know him. He is the biggest thief in the world. He is the master of thieves. Just see, he has stolen our butter, our clothes, our hearts, the sins of his devotees, and now your ring. So Vishaka, she's pretty mad. She's kind of storms off in a huff, and she tracks down Krishna and she finds him, and she demands to give the ring, for Krishna to give the ring back. And Krishna says, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't even know what this ring is. What I don't know anything about rings. You know, what is it? A nose ring? Is it an earring? Is it a toe ring? And she's like, oh, well, I caught you there too. You said you know nothing about rings, yet here you're naming all these different rings. And so he just keeps denying it. And ultimately some of the gopis start searching him, and they find it. They find the mirror ring. And so Krishna was caught. He was caught red-handed. So later, they go back to Radha and they say, look, we found your ring. Krishna had it. Lalita convinces Radha to punish Krishna for this. And so Radha says, okay, well, I will never speak to him again. And but she kind of says that a lot, but ultimately always ends up speaking to him again. She said, I will never speak to him again. So Vishaka, she then convinces Radha to take revenge on Krishna by stealing from him the way that he stole from her. And Radha looks at Vishaka and says, but Vishaka, I don't know how to steal. And Vishaka says, okay, I will teach you. And so she trains her on how to steal. And so some days later, they track down Krishna, and he's out with his calves out in the forest, and he's kind of laying down to take a nap, and he's there with his friend Madhu Mangal, who's one of his good friends. And Madhu Mangal had seen Krishna like kind of napping, and he thought, well, I want to take a nap too, but I don't want Krishna to leave without me, you know, when he gets up. So he like tied his leg to Krishna's leg. And so both of them are there napping. And so Vishaka and Radha decide to steal some of Krishna's things. So let's see. So they very deftly stole Krishna's peacock feather, his favorite black chadar, which is a good bit of trivia if anyone wants to know what color is Krishna's favorite chadar. It's black. Okay. And his stick for controlling the cows, his ankle bells, and his flute. And if that wasn't enough, then Vishaka got out some scissors and decided to cut Madhu Mangal's mustache a little bit unevenly, just like messed it up. And meanwhile, some people have wondered, like, okay, how old is he? He has a mustache. So Madhu Mangal's around like 14, and Krishna's around like 7 or 8 during this time. So then they run away. They're laughing. So when the boys wake up, Krishna pretty much realizes what happened. He's like, oh man, so we gotta get my stuff back. So Madhu Mangal and Krishna disguise themselves as old gopis, these old gopi ladies, and they go to Radha's house, to the palace where Radha lives. And they sit outside the palace wailing and crying and carrying on, and they're feigning separation from Krishna. They're saying, "Oh, my dear Krishna, oh." And the gopis are feeling pretty bad for them. They're like, "Oh no, these poor old gopis. They're feeling separation from Krishna. Like, what can we do to make them feel better?" And so Vishaka says, "Oh, well, maybe Radha, maybe you could just put on all that stuff you stole from Krishna, and you can pretend to be Krishna, and maybe that will soothe them. They'll think you're Krishna." So Radha does that, and she comes out, and she's playing the flute very nicely, and she's wearing his chadar and has his stick and his ankle bells and all the peacock feather, and immediately Krishna throws off his disguise and takes all his stuff back very quickly. And so then everybody's just kind of laughing. By this time, there was a lot of the girls were there, a lot of the gopis, a lot of the cowherd boys were there as well, because this had caused quite a ruckus, this whole thing. And so everybody's just kind of laughing at the whole thing, the whole pastime that had happened, except for poor Madhu Mangal, who, as he threw off his disguise, everyone could see his mustache that was all messed up. It was like half cut off. And so he was just so embarrassed, he started crying out of embarrassment. And so Vishaka then kind of waved his hand over his mustache and restored it to its former glory. And not only that, she gave him the boon that his mustache would never be cut by anyone else, but even himself couldn't cut it. So, and then I was thinking, well, maybe that's not such a boon. What if he wanted to cut it? But anyway, hopefully he doesn't want to cut it. So, and so that's the end of the pastime. And so that's all I have for today. And so if anyone has any questions or comments or can think of any other short pastimes that fall within any of these rasas, you're welcome to share it. So any comments, questions, stories? Yes. Chandrika.
So you were saying about like we don't always have to be formally reverential and like that. But in the past times there's so much personality, and that's like teaching us that even within our personality and in so many different ways, we can still be Krishna conscious, even if we're being mischievous like Krishna or anything like that.
Yeah.
So just that, we can always be Krishna conscious no matter what. And it doesn't mean that we're just formally reverential and we have no, personality at all.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I think that's a big misconception sometimes when people get involved into a spiritual practice. A lot of times they think, oh, I need to conform. I need to, kind of suppress my personality, but that's not true. Krishna loves variety. That's why there's so much of it. So, yes, Uncle S. Prabhu.
Yeah, I just, did you cover in the class the line where Prabhupada's listing the rasas, and he says, above all, even above Madhurya, is Parakiya.
Mm-hmm.
But Parakiya is a kind of Madhurya.
Yeah, I said that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what did you say? For my benefit. You said that, remember we were talking about this at the restaurant.
Yeah, I just said that Parakiya Ras is paramour love, and that it's a sub category of Madhurya Ras.
Although the way Prabhupada...
And that last story I told was an illustration of Parakiya Ras.
Okay.
Versus the former one, which was Madhurya Ras.
So when Prabhupada lists the rasas here in Madhurya, the way he lists Madhurya, it sounds like that's just normal wedded love, married love.
Mm-hmm.
But because Parakiya is unmarried,
Mm-hmm.
and it's above the married. How does that square with our morality?
How does that square with our morality?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, our morality is in some ways a little bit mundane in the spiritual world. It works well for us here in the material world to have these morals, but in the spiritual world, things are a little bit different. And so I don't feel qualified to speak on this topic, so perhaps you can.
Well, just a little. Prabhupada talks about how in the material world, the highest thing, or in the spiritual world, the highest thing is reflected pervertedly.
Mm-hmm.
So parakya ras is the highest thing in the spiritual world, but you come reflected in the material light, it comes out as illicit sex.
Right.
So we shouldn't imitate that.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. That's all I know. I mean,
Okay.
That's what I know.
Is there any other questions?
Krishna is the owner of everything. It's not like, yeah. I mean, Krishna is the owner of everything. We're not the owner of even our wives in a sense.
Right.
So, thoughts?
Very good point. Yeah. So if Krishna is the owner of everything, how can he be taking your wife? Yeah. So, all right. Is there any other comments or questions? Yes.
And if I'm not mistaken, there's a past time where Krishna married Radharani.
Yeah, I've heard that pastime. I don't recall enough of it to recount it, but
Yeah, me neither. I went to the tree though where they got married. That was cool.
yeah.
Why did they get married? You know? What is that?
Oh, I butchered too much. I can't remember her name, so I had a long time ago.
Where can we read about it?
Well, I want to ask, where did you get,
Yeah.
where did you get that?
The last story?
But you got it from Nrsimha Swami?
Yeah, from Indrayama
Where
Swami.
did he get it?
I forget what he did mention where he gets these stories from, but I did not write down.
Is it written?
Yeah, he's been working at the Vrindavan Research Institute, and they're like translating all kinds of different
Did they mention Gopal
books.
Temple? That's usually.
He did mention that. I don't know if that specific story was in it, but that was mentioned in the class as a whole. So,
That's why Jiva Goswami. Yeah.
yeah,
I got a good one for you.
yeah.
You ready for this one?
Yeah.
Okay. Who is Radharani's husband in Ram Leela?
In Ram Leela?
Check this out. This I heard from a Swami in Vrindavan,
Okay.
ISKCON Swami. He's going a parikrama with him. So, I mean, I assume it's bona fide. So Hanuman is eating food that Sita cooked back in Ram Leela, and he has this thought like, if I could have this food every day, and then Ram, okay. So that's Radharani's husband. Of course, they never, mating at all. It's just he gets the food. He had this desire for Sita's food every day. Yeah, that's what the Swami said.
Wow. Okay, so that's her husband in Vrindavan, then, right?
What's that?
Her husband in Vrindavan is Hanuman. Wow.
Because he wanted to have Sita's cooking.
Yeah,
And he had this thought. When he was eating.
that's pretty far out.
So you mean Abhimanyu is an incarnation of Hanuman?
That's what he's saying.
Wow.
So-called husband.
Yeah, I wanted to tell that story when Krishna impersonates Abhimanyu, but it didn't quite fit. But I just love that story. It's so funny. So, all right, we'll end there. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.